Oh, hey, welcome back to Cardboard Brewing Company. I heard you were swinging by for some underplayed lands for your next brew. I've got them pulled out already, so come on, take a look. This is a land that I pulled in a booster pack way back in the day, and I've been very, very happy to run it in a variety of decks. Drownyard Temple came out years ago. It's a land that taps for colorless, but it has this really interesting ability that says pay 3, and you can return this card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. It's a really unassuming land, but it can do so much in your deck. I mean, immediately I think of decks that like to mill themselves, or decks that like to discard cards. Any deck that likes to return lands from their graveyard and get some kind of trigger, really, really good. There's commanders that are fantastic in putting lands in their graveyards, then you have a way to return them again. See, I'm thinking of things like Gitrog Monster here. If you're able to discard or mill the Drownyard Temple, or even just sack the Drownyard Temple with Gitrog's ability, you get to draw a card off Gitrog, then you just pay 3 anytime to bring it back, and you kind of have an engine going there. That 3 mana that you pay is also instant speed. And so if you're holding up any counter spell or removal magic on other players' turns, and they don't end up doing what you want them to do, and you've got 3 mana just sitting there, well, now you can just pay the 3 on the turn before yours turn and return this land to the battlefield. It's tapped, but then your turn starts and it's untapped. This card's really, really good. It's got so many different uses. I use a lot of decks that do like discard effects and mill effects and stuff like that. I love playing from my graveyard. So having a land that I can auto play from my graveyard and not have to do any shenanigans with is pretty cool. It's also really awesome in any deck that likes to sack its own lands, which I think is an archetype. Come on, man. Archetype. I think this archetype is getting more popular, or at least it is in my book. I've seen them more often lately than I have in the past. And Drownyard Temple is just a shoe-in those decks. It's really cool. And on the off chance that I actually draw this card instead of milling it or discarding it or sacrificing it or anything like that, I use this for other resources, right? I almost never play this land onto my battlefield. I'm using this to pitch the discard effects. I'm using this against my opponents. When they make me discard a card, I'm throwing Drownyard Temple. It's just there. Unless I have no other lands to play on that turn and I'm tapped out trying to get a different land, then I'll play the land. But it's the last one. I really don't like to play this land out of my hand onto the battlefield. I want it in my graveyard as often as possible to make use of that 3 mana ability. If you've got a Gitrog deck or a Titania deck, or you just love Sun Titan like I do, Drownyard Temple is a really great card to have in your deck just to be able to use those effects really well. Man, if I thought Drownyard Temple was old, these next lands are even older. I'm going to give you 5 lands here. They all have the same effect, but they tap for different colors. They're called layer lands, and I'll read through them here, but I'm going to butcher a few names. Forgive me, please. Croesus's Catacombs, Daragaz's Caldera, Dromar's Cavern, Treva's Ruins, and Risk Grove are all layer lands that have a really interesting effect. It says that when they enter the battlefield, you have to sacrifice it unless you return a non-layer land that you control to its owner's hand. And then it taps for 1 of 3 colors. And it may look like that this land's really bad out the gate, but the benefit here is that it enters untapped. And you just have to return a different land to your hand in order to keep this one, which means that you could just tap the land that you're going to bounce to your hand with this land for its mana, and then bounce that land, put this into play, and you have an untapped land that taps for 1 of 3 colors. And so you don't actually lose mana the turn that it comes into play. It doesn't set you back. Now, it does set you back for the next turn because you're down a land at that point, right? You bounced 1 to put 1 in. But on the turn that you play it, you don't actually go down in tempo. So why is this land good? Well, that tempo play is one of the reasons why. You can play this on tempo and color fix your deck, which is really good. And it color fixes you 3 colors, which is also really good for your 3+ color decks. It also has some interesting synergies in decks like we talked about with the Drownyard Temple. If you are doing anything where you're sacrificing lands, here's a land that sacrifices a land. It sacrifices itself if you don't bounce a land. And I'm no judge. I don't know the rules perfectly, but I think with the layer lands, if you play it, you can tap it before you sacrifice it. That enter the battlefield trigger goes on the stack. You can respond to it by tapping it for a mana, and then it'll sacrifice itself, right? So there's some interesting things you can do with the layer lands in a deck where you want to sacrifice your lands so that you can bring them back from the graveyard later. Heck, even in a deck that's running white in 3 colors, and you got Sun Titan in the deck, doing that play and then returning at the turn that Sun Titan comes back in is a pretty cool effect. I mean, that's kind of fun. The other nice thing about these lands is that they're 3 color tappers, and they're really, really cheap for your budget. They're like 20 cents to pick these up, and they don't enter tapped. That's the most important part. A lot of these lands that tap for multiple colors enter the battlefield tapped, and so you actually are like losing speed in order to pick up on the color fixing, where these layer lands will keep you up to speed for the turn that you play it, unless you're doing some extra land plays and stuff like that. And it'll get you the extra colors, which is super nice. I don't know how many decks out there are running 3 or more colors that are doing sacrifice lands matter effects or lands and graveyard effects decks. I don't know what that looks like, but I think that there's something here, especially if you're trying something out and you're in 3 colors or more. Grab all of these. They're going to enable your deck so well, and they're really easy and cheap to pick up. Oh, by the way, don't forget to punch your loyalty card by hitting the like button. All filled punch cards are now considered mythic rares. They're still bulk, but they shine a little bit. Let's grab a land from a set that was really not well received, but I think this land is it's pretty okay. It's pretty good. Amonkhet Raceway is a land from the Amonkhet set. It's got an ability called Start Your Engines, which means that if you have no speed, which sounds really goofy out of context, that this land starts with 1 speed, and it increases once on each of your turns when an opponent loses life. Max speed is 4. Now, that is all nonsense until you read the bottom of this card. So the middle of the card says that you could tap Amonkhet Raceway for 1 colorless mana, but when you have max speed, you could tap it to give target creature haste until end of turn, which is kind of sick on a land. Giving a creature haste just by tapping the land is awesome. This effect is great because getting your opponents to lose life on your turn is not that hard. It's not like you have to do combat damage to them. It's any form of life loss triggers this card to then gain a speed. So if you're in aristocrats and you're pinging people for life, or you're doing some kind of burn deck or a creature combat, obviously, or anything that just does a chip damage thing, Amonkhet Raceway triggers and gives you a max speed increase. And the nice thing too is while you're gaining the speed, you could tap this card for the colorless mana and use it to cast all of your cards that you need to. But once you get into mid and late game and you're playing 1 Haymaker a turn to just do a bunch of damage to people or to have high value creatures, giving it haste for just tapping 1 land is super, super nice. It really speeds up the game a lot for you, and it keeps your opponents on their toes. They never know when it's going to hit. The downside of playing this card late game is pretty rough, and so then you could just pitch this thing in the graveyard for discard effects and stuff like that. But if you start with this card in your opening hand, or you get it in the first couple turns, like up to turn 4 probably is okay, then you've got a way to really swing these big creatures at players in the late game, and that's really what you're trying to do in decks that are playing really late game big creatures anyways. If you're playing 8 drops and you just need them to attack, then Amonkhet Raceway is a shoe-in because you're just going to build up speed while you're trying to get to 8 mana, and then you're off to the races. Oh, man. Here's a land that I'm about ready to put into almost every single deck. It's really, really cool. It's called Cryptic Caves. It's a land that taps for colorless, and it also has an ability where you can pay 1, tap it, and sacrifice this land, and then you draw a card. And you can only activate this if you control 5 or more lands. So the downside here is that you can't do this on turn 3 or turn 4 unless you ramped really hard. But the upside is that mid to late game, when you don't need any more land drops, really, you can pay 1 and sack this guy and replace it and get a different card in your hand. It's kind of like Mind Stone, but on a land, which is kind of cool. I like that effect a lot. Having more lands is always really, really nice. But if we keep talking about decks kind of like we do with Drawn Yard Temple, this is really awesome when you've got cards like Sun Titan and Gitrog Monster and Titania, because you have a way to put this land in your graveyard for super cheap, and you get to draw a card off it, which is better than anything else, in my opinion. I would love to pay 1 mana and sack this thing to draw a card. Especially for a land, too. Paying 1 mana and tapping this was technically like tapping 2 mana, right? Because you have to tap this land, so it doesn't actually tap for a mana, right? Then you have to tap 1 from something else. So you're paying 2 mana technically and sacrifice this land to draw a card. That's a really cheap effect, especially on a land, in order to draw a card. It goes crazy in decks where you can play this multiple times and get this back from your graveyard. It's super, super cool. But even in decks that don't do that, I don't mind having a land that I can throw away and replace with something else later in the game. There are so many points in games where I've got 8 or 9 mana, it's getting close to the end, and I'm not spending all that mana every turn. And so if I've got that 2 extra mana available with nothing to spend it on, it's kind of nice to replace this land and try to get something great that's going to help me push into the end of the game and win the game. I love this card. I think it's really, really good. Give it a shot and let me know how it goes for you. How often do you actually sacrifice this land in your games? Okay, this land's a little bit more known, but I haven't seen it in my own games, but I know it's popular based on some other research that I do. Archway of Innovation. Archway of Innovation enters the battlefield tapped unless you control an island when you play it. So it's a turn 2 play more than likely. And it taps for blue, which is super nice, giving you a colored mana instead of all the colorless lands that we've been talking about up till now. But the really cool part with Archway of Innovation is that you can pay a blue and tap it, and the next spell that you cast this turn has Improvise. Improvise is an ability that says that your artifacts can help cast that spell. Each artifact you tap after you're done activating mana abilities pays for 1 colorless mana. So let's put that into layman's words here. Let's say that you want to cast a Caged Sun, which would be a great card in a mono blue artifact deck. Caged Sun costs 6 colorless mana. But with Archway of Innovation, you can pay a blue and tap Archway, which will then trigger Improvise. And then you could just tap 6 artifacts. And now you can just put the Caged Sun into play because you have 6 mana from those artifacts. Or you could do any other combination. You could pay 1 blue and tap Archway of Innovation to trigger Improvise and pay 3 more mana from your lands and then tap 3 artifacts. And you got Caged Sun into play, right? It gives you a lot of options based on what your artifact situation is on your board to help you be able to pay for spells. And it could be for any spell. It's not just artifacts. I just use Caged Sun because it's colorless. If you're in mono blue and you really want to play a Cyclonic Rift, you can pay 1 blue and then tap Archway of Innovation to give Cyclonic Rift Improvise, and then just pay your 2 blue from your mana base and tap 5 artifacts, and now you've got Cyclonic Rift. Not that hard. I mean, what artifacts can you tap to make this awesome? Well, how about all your treasure tokens that normally you have to tap in sacks? You can only do that 1 time. Now you can tap them for Improvise. How about clue tokens? Anyone else like to draw cards out there? Well, now you can use them for mana before you sack them to draw cards with the clue token effect. This land is so good in artifact decks, obviously, because you need the artifacts in order to use the Improvise effect. And just think about this land if you get a chance to untap it on 1 turn. Man, like how many artifacts you have to have in play where you can start just playing cards for free like crazy with Archway of Innovation. It's kind of insane if you get enough artifact tokens into play. One way I like to think of Archway of Innovation, it's not exactly, but it's pretty close. This is basically like Urza on a land, right? It turns your artifacts into mana to cast a spell. Now, it's only 1 time. It's not all the time. And it gives you colorless mana. It doesn't give you blue. But for a land, that's a pretty good ability. Urza should have colored mana because it's a creature. Because look what his land can do. Holy crap. It's really, really good. This is a slot in your blue artifact deck. So go pick one up. Okay, I've got another 5 lands for you. They're all the same type of land. They have the same ability on them, but they tap for different colors. These are called depletion lands. I'm going to show you here the Remote Farm. Remote Farm enters the battlefield tapped with 2 depletion counters on it. Then you could tap it and remove a depletion counter from this land, and you add 2 white mana. If there are no depletion counters on this land, you sacrifice it. I don't know what it is about this list of cards with lands that sacrifice themselves, but I'm kind of all in on it. They're really cool. Not every land does that, obviously, but there's a lot on this list that do. And when you can utilize that ability to have the land sack itself and return it, you get some huge payoffs. And the depletion lands do that for you. Downside here is that they enter tapped, and we like lands that enter untapped. But after the turn you play them, they now ramp you each time, right? You're getting 2 mana out of this card per time that you tap it. And then there's the next obvious drawback, which is you have to sacrifice it after you use it twice. But if you have a way to return it to the battlefield, it's awesome, right? You Sun Titan this thing, and you get to use it again on the next turn and the next turn. You keep it going. It's pretty cool. Where it really shines, though, is in decks that use Proliferate. Oh, my goodness. Proliferating the depletion counters on these lands is awesome. Man, it's like having free ramp every single turn. And let's just imagine you're in multiple colors. If you're playing a 2-color Proliferate deck and you run 2 of these lands and you proliferate them every turn, you are going crazy with your mana base. It's really, really cool. The names of the cards are Remote Farm, Saprazan Scary, Peat Bog, Sandstone Needle, and Hickory Woodlot. These are also very cheap to purchase lands. I've never seen them in play before, but they do awesome stuff. I just think most people don't know about them, and so here you are. I'm showing them to you. These lands are really, really cool. There's not a whole lot more to say about these. They just lands that tap for 2, which those are pretty hard to find in general anyways. But lands that tap for 2 are really strong, and they've got this minor effect that you have to sacrifice them. You don't put this in every single deck that exists. You put them in decks that can get the back on the battlefield or in decks that can proliferate the counters on them, and then they go bananas on them. And I just don't see them in any of those kinds of decks. I've never seen them, like I said before, and I got to see more of these. All right, let's switch gears to a land that's going to be a lot different than the ones we just talked about. This one's called Ghost Town, It taps for a colorless mana, and you could pay 0 to return this land to its owner's hand, but only if it's not your turn. What a goofy card. But the reason why this card is awesome is because it triggers landfall decks every single turn. It's really, really cool. If you're in any deck that loves landfall and you're not running Ghost Town, you need to go pick one up right now. They're a little more expensive than the other cards we talked about, a couple bucks to get one of these, probably because it's old. It's from Tempest. It's a long time ago. But this effect is so unique for a commander. There aren't very many lands that let you bounce themselves for free. And the cool part here is that you could still tap this land for the colorless mana on your turn to be able to cast spells, and then you could bounce it for 0. It's not like you have to pay 0 and tap this land to bounce it. That land is still usable. The big downside of this land is that you don't actually grow your mana base when you use Ghost Town every single turn. But when you're getting to the late game, when you don't really need to play more lands every turn, and it's way more beneficial to trigger all those landfalls, Ghost Town is what you need. It could be hard late game in landfall decks to find enough lands to play out of your hand. You may have a bunch of ramp spells and all that stuff, but the more landfall triggers, the better. And this guarantees you your land drop every single turn. No problem. I've also got a really weird strategy with Ghost Town. It kind of works. It's okay. Give you a little bit of a break here, right? But it's like, it's a decent land for a deck that's trying to do enchantments on lands-based strategies, right? Like, as much as I would love to have a land that has hexproof, those are not very common, nor are they very cheap. And so the next best thing is a land that when my opponent targets that land to get rid of all the auras, I can at least put the land back in my hand and get the auras back on there in some other way. I really don't like having my lands destroyed, especially with all of the auras falling off them. So if at least I can get the land back and play it the next turn and put auras on it again, I'd like to do that, you know? Is this the most powerful way to use this card? No, but it works. It works pretty okay. It's better in the landfall decks for sure. This land is the most known land on the list, but I can't not talk about this land. I think this land is so, so good. It needs to be in more decks because I'm the only person I know that plays it, but I haven't played with everybody in the world, you know? The land is called Ash Barrens. It taps for 1 colorless, and it has basic land cycling for 1. So you pay 1 colorless mana, you discard this card out of your hand, and you search your library for a basic land and put it in your hand. Nothing super great on the card by itself, but the applications are really, really wide. Firstly, if you have no other lands to play, this thing enters the battlefield untapped, so you can tap it the turn it comes into play. Huge upside. Really good. Secondly, the basic land cycling only costs 1, which really can't be any cheaper. You pay 1, you put this in the graveyard, and you grab a basic land of the color that you need. And that's the coolest part about this card, is that it's 1 mana color fixing. So early on in the game, like turn 2, after you've played your turn 1 land, if you need to grab a certain color to make sure that you have the right colors for this game, you just pitch this guy and you go get that land. On top of that, this card puts itself in the graveyard for 1 mana. And so you've got strategies just like with Drownyard Temple, where you can find ways to return this to the battlefield and enable those strategies, right? You're back into decks like Gitrog. You're back into decks with Sun Titan and Titania. They're so good. They're so good. And these lands do it for so cheap. And Ash Baron might be the cheapest one. It doesn't matter when you get this card. You can just throw it out. And it's in your graveyard waiting for you for when you can put it back into play. It's so good. I love this card so much. There's the obvious one where this card works really well with cycling decks, which is a pretty common archetype in Commander. This counts as cycling because it's basic land cycling on the card. It's really cheap to do that as well. And the really, really minor effect, but some people swear by it. That's why people love fetch lands so much. Ash Barrens thins your deck of 1 basic land. And so your odds of drawing a basic land now for the rest of the game goes down by 1. In a Commander game, that doesn't matter that much. That's 1%. But I'll take 1% over 0. It's pretty nice for that. And fetch lands, they do it cheaper. Costs you 1 life versus 1 mana. But Ash Barrens is 10 cents. And so running both is pretty cool. You can run your fetch lands and your Ash Barrens. You have a lot of ways to thin your deck out of cards that you don't want to draw later on in the game. Back in my day, we were big fans of Terramorphic Expanse for cards that color fixed your mana. And there are better tools for that now. And Ash Barrens is one of them. It's a really underrated card. It's very, very good. I literally run it in every single deck that I play. It doesn't matter what the colors are. Maybe 5 color decks is where I shy away from it if I have enough cards that get me multiple colors. But in 4 colors and less, I run it everywhere. Even in monocolored decks, this card is awesome because it thins your deck and you have a ton of basics and you're ready to go. I love Ash Barrens. It's really awesome. Please give it a try, especially alongside cards that return Ash Barrens from your graveyard to anywhere. It doesn't matter. Even if you put this back in your hand and you cycle it again, Now you're thinning your deck a second time with the same card for 1 mana. It's pretty nice. It's pretty nice. Here's another old land, but a goodie. I like this one a lot. It's called High Market. It's a land that taps for colorless mana, and you can tap it to sacrifice a creature and gain a life. And this sounds really, really bad, but it's not. It's really good, actually. The benefit here is that High Market taps for colorless mana, so you can always use it in order to play the spells that you need to. But you always have access to a sack outlet for a creature. If there's a creature on your board that you know that your opponents are going to Path to Exile or Swords to Plowshare, and they're just going to exile it, you can respond by tapping High Market and sacrificing that creature, and it's saved, and then you can bring it back later. It's pretty great. The 1 life that you gain from that sacrifice effect doesn't matter. That's the part of the card that really doesn't matter much. But who knows? There might be something in your deck that matters when you gain life. And so you can use this for that effect if you want. But the main benefit of High Market is that you're using it to protect your creatures from exiling. And it gets even crazier when you put it in decks that really care about sacrifice triggers. So if you have a lot of cards on your board that say when you sacrifice a creature and then you use High Market, now it triggers those cards. It's awesome. It's really good there. You have a free sack outlet every single turn, 1 time minimum from your land base. And this is a card that most players are not going to target and remove. And so it's always there ready for you. And on those turns that you're feeling really safe and you know that people aren't going to remove your stuff, you can use this land for that mana later on in the game. It works out pretty good there. It doesn't happen to me every single game that I play this card, but in every single game that I do play this card, it does feel like a safety net for when I have a really high value creature that I want to have in my graveyard versus exile so I can bring it back later. Tapping this is such a cheap cost to be able to do that and just have a creature sitting there waiting to take a removal that it's not actually going to get removed on, right? It's not going to get exiled anymore. One of my favorite old land cards is called Terrain Generator, which is a card I'm not going to talk about here that much, but it's on screen for you, so you can check it out. It taps for colorless. You can pay 2 and tap it, put a basic land from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. I put this card in a lot of decks that are looking to ramp but don't have green in their deck. But the card that I like more, and it might be just a little bit more expensive, but it does way more, is Horizon of Progress. Horizon of Progress has 3 abilities. The first one is that you can tap it and pay 1 life, and you can add 1 mana of any type that a land you control could produce. So it literally does Reflecting Pool, but at the cost of 1 life. And Reflecting Pool is not a cheap card, and that's the only thing Reflecting Pool does is tap for 1 mana of any color you could produce already. This costs you a life to do it, but it has 2 more abilities on it as well. The second ability is that you can pay 3 mana and tap it and put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. And that's why I brought up Terrain Generator. Look at these 2 cards. They're really similar. Terrain Generator is 1 mana cheaper, but you only get to put basic lands onto your battlefield. Horizon of Progress costs 1 extra mana, but you can put any land from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. I would rather pay the cheaper one more often than not, especially in monocolor and dual color decks. But once you get into higher colored decks, you don't have as many basics available to you, and Terrain Generator just runs out of value. But Horizon of Progress, if you've got that land in your hand that you want to ramp, you got ramp in any color for 3 mana, and you could do it at any time. So every turn that you're holding up removal spells and you don't need to play them, before your turn starts, you can just pay 3 and tap this and put another land into play, and now you ramp again. It's really, really sweet, especially for a deck that's loaded in non-basic lands. And then lastly, it's got the effect of Cryptic Caves on this card as well. You can pay 1 and sacrifice Horizon of Progress and draw a card. And so now you've got something for late game when you don't need any more lands on the battlefield because you've been playing them all with Horizon of Progress, the second ability. Now you can throw this guy in the graveyard and replace it and draw a card. Sick. It's so cool. And you get to go even higher with that when you use all the cards we talked about with Cryptic Caves. You just throw this in a Sun Titan or into Gitrog or anything like that, and you've got a whole bunch of ways to bring this guy back, and now you've got a land that draws you cards reliably. This card is so cool, and it's a land I never see, but it's got all the abilities that we want in Commander. It has a way to get you the mana color that you need. It has a way to let you play more lands, and it has a way to draw. That's like the best thing on a land. I don't know any other lands that do all of that all at once, but we're looking for those effects on lands. And this card's just like slipping under the radar. I just don't think people know about it, and I gotta let people know. Like, this land is so good. It goes in so many decks. It's awesome. There's tons of reason why this card is incredible, but one of the main reasons that it doesn't enter tapped. Isn't that crazy? This card could easily enter tapped for how much stuff it does, but this is an untapped land that'll give you mana on the turn it comes out, and it'll give you added effects for the turns that you need other stuff in play. It does so much. And because of all the modes that this land can do, it can go in such a wide variety of decks. It feels like a staple land in almost every archetype. Put this land in pretty much any deck, and then let me know what decks it doesn't work well in. I'm kind of curious. Most of these lands have great abilities for synergies in your deck, but if you need some budget lands that can tap for multiple colors, I've got you covered here too. Enjoy!